Donald Trump believes his ego is his strength, but actually it's his weakness. It sucks to have a narcissist as a leader in the good times, but we'll explain why it's especially dangerous now that the world is in chaos. I'm Amanda Marcotte. Welcome to Standing Room Only. If you ever want an illustration of how narcissists defeat themselves, you can't do better than Donald Trump's failure of a birthday party. Yes, I know, we were told it was a military parade to celebrate the anniversary of the Army, but nobody believes this, especially not the people who showed up to sing Donald Trump this. Trump clearly thought this was going to be an epic celebration to his greatness, but he got what he actually deserves: underwhelming turnout and a listless affair, especially compared to the No Kings protests, where millions of people turned out around the country to denounce the narcissist in chief. Trump was bored. The sparse crowd was bored. The only thing that wasn't boring was the robot dogs. Reportedly, Trump called up his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, and reamed him out over it. But this episode of Standing Room Only isn't just about gloating over Trump's failure, as fun as that is. It's about understanding how Donald Trump's self-obsession makes him weak. His narcissism is an Achilles heel, and it can be exploited. To be clear, clinical narcissism is rare, and we're not psychologists, we're not diagnosing anyone here. Still, I find it helpful in our time to keep around a checklist of the major traits of clinical narcissism. First, a grandiose sense of self-importance.
They said he's the greatest president we've ever had. And then one of them said, sir, you're the greatest president of my lifetime. I said, I like the first one more.
A preoccupation with fantasies of success, power, and beauty.
I could be at a gorgeous beach somewhere in the world. There's sun beaming down on this beautiful body in a bathing suit.
A belief they are special and can only be understood by other special people, which is how you end up bragging about how familiar you were with golfing legend Arnold Palmer.
This is a guy that was all man, and I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God.
A need for excessive admiration.
I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer.
A lack of empathy.
Are you still a believer in Santa? Because at 7, it's marginal, right?
Or, not as funny, blowing off the fact that you almost got your vice president murdered with a mob that you incited.
When told that his vice president was in danger, Trump allegedly said back, quote, "So what?"
And finally, arrogance, haughty behaviors, and attitudes.
I am the chosen one. I alone can fix it.
Most people aren't narcissists, but I think that narcissism is the key to understanding the MAGA movement and the hold that Trump has over his followers. Scholars of fascism say that a key component is selling the followers on this idea that they're heroes engaged in an epic struggle. Kids today call it main character syndrome, and it's endemic to MAGA. People imagine life as a movie, and they're the star. Think of every idiot who went into a grocery store during the pandemic to film themselves having a tantrum because they were asked to wear a mask. Or every crypto bro who thinks he has the cheat code to being a multi-millionaire. Narcissists make great cult leaders or great fascist leaders because they spin up these fantasies of grandeur that their followers can get caught up in. A really good example of this is Donald Trump on January 6th telling the crowd that they have to fight or they won't have a country anymore. While you or I can see through Trump's lies, his followers are so blinded by these heroic fantasies that they can't see the truth. Trump's birthday parade is actually a microcosm of this. He dodged the draft when he was young, but he's here to steal the macho valor of the soldiers driving the tanks. His followers were told this exciting story by their beloved leader about how this was going to be the most epic event ever. Of course, reality couldn't live up to it. I hear that Fox News was still trying to sell it. My producer Russell says he's got some clips for us to watch.
This really has become a day of love.
Glowing with hope and optimism, that's the overarching tenor here.
If I was the Ayatollah watching Fox News coverage, which I hope he is, of this parade, I would be very frightened.
And you know, Jackie, there was all of this hype that, because it's the President of the United States' birthday, it was all going to be about tributes to him. There has been zero focus on the president.
This is nothing like how it was portrayed by naysayers.
Did you guys get a birthday card for the president? You're going to be with him today. Did you remember it's his birthday too?
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to our President, Donald Trump.
And I think it's our responsibility just to refer to him as the MAGA King.
It is, of course, the birthday of the President of the United States, and happy birthday, Mr. President. But I would get in trouble if I didn't mention that it's also my wedding anniversary.
It was just hilarious watching them just be like, this is great, the Ayatollah is gonna be so afraid. And then it's like, the soldier's like, hi kids. Okay, clearly that's really funny, but this oversell is not a sign of strength. There's this myth that narcissists are really self-confident, and Trump exploits that myth. But as NYU psychologist Pascal Wallish noted in his research, the boasting and strutting of narcissists is an attempt to hide how insecure they are. And boy, these past couple of weeks have sure shown how weak Trump is. He sent the National Guard to Los Angeles to show how tough he was, and it blew up in his face. Trump says he's putting a pause on deporting farm workers, but then his aide Stephen Miller strong-arms him, and now the deportations are back on again. And then there's the situation with Israel and Iran. Israel's Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, clearly thinks Trump is weak, which is why he thinks he can rope the US into war with Iran. There's a lot of confusion now about what's going to happen next. Different factions of MAGA are fighting. Some of them really want to go to war, and some of them see it as politically toxic. But one thing is certain, Trump has no idea what to do.
I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
He's weak and indecisive. I'll be discussing this more on Pass the Mic with my guest, Andrew O'Hare. The arrests of Democratic politicians are another example of narcissistic overkill. Trump's ICE goons arrested New York mayoral candidate Brad Lander for escorting immigrants out of a courtroom. California Senator Alex Padilla was manhandled by federal agents for trying to ask Kristi Noem a question. And in New Jersey, Democratic politicians are being arrested for protesting ICE facilities. This overreaction may make MAGA people excited, but the rest of us can see it for what it is. Trump and his buddies are so fragile that they can't even handle peaceful criticism. The larger public is really starting to see the danger of valorizing this mindset. Think of this idea of main character syndrome. You don't call it a syndrome because it's a good thing. And if you go on social media, you'll see there's a growing number of videos of people talking about the dangers of narcissism or warning each other about red flags.
The 5 warning signs that someone's a narcissist. Number 1,
you might be dating a narcissist. Here are the signs. Part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, it's tagged in the caption. And to everyone that commented on the first part saying that they realized that their partner was a narcissist.
Should I post this on Instagram? What are people going to say?
Some of this stuff is helpful, but I don't think it's enough to say main character syndrome is bad. It's okay to want to be a hero. We just need to find a way to do it that's not so self-centered, a way that's more inclusive and helpful and community-oriented. That's why these No Kings protests were such a great counterpoint to Trump's narcissistic birthday parade. They were not about loudmouth men talking about how they're alpha males. It was anti-hierarchy. It was strength in numbers. And it really exposed how weak the big bully Trump actually is. I'm not saying ego is bad. We all have an ego. Sometimes it's great to be the star, but it's also important to live in community with each other and take care of each other. It's a deeper joy than constantly seeking that main character energy, and it's how we show real strength, which is nothing like the weak narcissism of Trump. Welcome to Pass the Mic. My guest today is Andrew O'Hare. He's my colleague at Salon, and these are heavy issues, foreign policy stuff. He writes about that. So I asked him here to be the expert on that, but also he writes super well about the psychology of these different leaders. And so I thought, who better to talk to about how Trump's narcissism is playing into, unfortunately, life and death world events. Thank you, Andrew, for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here, Amanda. And yes, lucky me to get to write about this stuff. It's an incredibly confusing situation right now.
Just the past however many decades, this just keeps coming up. Anyway, the one thing that's different from every other time there's been a conflagration in the Middle East of this level, we have Donald Trump as president.
Boy, that has changed a lot of it. Yeah, for sure. Because nobody knows from one day to the next what position he's going to hold, where he's going to go. I suppose that he thinks on some level that it's strategic to keep people guessing, but I'm also not sure how intentional it is.
It's not intentional. I refuse to believe it's intentional. Yeah, no, our colleague Alex Galbraith had a great phrase for it. He called it Trump's Schrodinger's stance on the war. And it really, I think on one hand, Trump understands that it's like politically toxic to go to war with Iran. On the other hand, it does seem like every time he gets off the phone with Lindsey Graham or Bibi Netanyahu, he goes on Truth Social and like threatens to bomb them. So like, what do you think is like going on here?
I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think Trump does understand, and a lot of the core people in the MAGA universe, Steve Bannon, some of the other people who've been with him for a long time, part of the appeal of Trump from the beginning was, at least not from the very beginning, from 2015, 2016, was that he was supposedly against interventionist war. He wasn't going to get us launched into some big regime change war overseas. But there are these people who sort of get him riled up about it. Like you mentioned Lindsey Graham, Netanyahu, who I wrote about this past weekend, a much stronger personality than Donald Trump is, who like, this is a historic mission. Americans will unite around you. You know, think of the military glories of the past. And he can be, I think, get seduced into that. And so I definitely think he's just yo-yoing back and forth here and does not have a grip on it right now.
Yeah, I see a lot of people on social media debating this, and you'll see some people say, well, Trump really does understand that like the Iraq war was this almost like ego death for a lot of Republicans, and that he was this promise of like a jingoism that doesn't involve going to war, and like that's very appealing, and he would kind of get them their groove back. And other people saying, yeah, but he's also a violent POS who wants to kill brown people and wants to bomb Iran. And I'm like, and they treat this as if they're two different ideas, and I'm like, or both.
Yeah, I think Alex's Schrodinger's position thing is accurate here. Trump would be perfectly happy to stage a war if it was going to be super easy.
Yeah,
and I think
that's why he wants to go after Greenland.
Yes, Greenland is not going to defend itself. There are 60,000 people who live there. It would be a major international incident for sure, but there would be nothing to stop the United States from actually taking Greenland if you decided to do that. This case is clearly different, but there are people who will tell him, oh, the Israelis have done the hard part. All you have to do is come in and bomb a nuclear facility. What could possibly go wrong there? But he can get seduced into this idea of like a glorious victory would be great. An ugly, gruesome stalemate would not be great. And I think he has a hard time wrapping his head around the fact that nobody can guarantee an outcome. Yeah. Bibi can say whatever he wants to say and will say that, but nobody can guarantee what the outcome is here. Even though the war has gone extremely well for Israel so far, nobody knows what the outcome of that will be either. And I think Donald Trump is very unhappy with ambiguity. He doesn't like it. And unfortunately, international relations has a hell of a lot of that.
I mean, he famously doesn't want to read his briefings.
Yeah.
And that's probably half of it is like, well, I always think a part of it is he doesn't want to put his glasses on because he's a narcissist. And so they give him this like briefing and he's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Read?
Even in this administration, which has been entirely constructed to tell him what he wants to hear. That's the mission of everybody in the administration. Tell Donald Trump. The flaw in the first administration is that there were a handful of people who had just enough adherence to ethical and professional standards that they tried to pursue the facts, you know. But even so, even with the way this administration has been constructed, you can see that apparently Tulsi Gabbard, the national intelligence chief, has told him that there is no evidence that Iran was close to building a nuclear bomb, and that that's a fiction cooked up by the Israelis. I don't know the facts. You don't know the facts. But he doesn't want to hear that because it's confusing, and it creates a confusing, paradoxical situation where it's hard to know what to do.
Part of me wonders if one of the reasons he goes on True Social, and like people in traditional media and traditional politics are like, he goes on True Social and says one thing, he goes on True Social and contradicts himself 10 minutes later. He might be like doing the thing he does where he's just sort of working his material and seeing what resonates with the audience. And I kind of think that's what's happening. And he's just trying to figure out what's most popular. Again, the man is a narcissist, and that's how they operate. In fact, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between him and Bibi Netanyahu in that way, because Trump's like, he famously parrots the thing that the last person he spoke to said.
I'd like to ask the question, what about a clean DACA bill now, and with a commitment that we go into a comprehensive immigration reform procedure?
I think a lot of people would like to see that. But I think we have to do that.
Mr. President,
to be clear, though, I think what Senator Feinstein's asking here, when we talk about just DACA, we don't want to be back here 2 years later. You have to have security, as the secretary would tell you.
But I think that's what she's saying.
Well, no, I think she's saying something different.
That is actually a classic trait of narcissists, because they just sort of want people to like them. And so they will always just sort of say what they think will make them popular. So he's been on the phone with Netanyahu, who tells him bombing Iran is like a good idea. And the only thing in Trump's head is like, I want Netanyahu to like me. And like, Netanyahu is a bad person, but he's not actually like a narcissist.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think that Netanyahu is much more intelligent than Donald Trump. He is a committed ideologue. There may be elements of, psychopathology there that I'm not qualified to diagnose, but he's a committed ideologue and a zealot, not in terms of the Jewish religion or anything like that, but in terms of what he sees is Israel's role on the world stage. He has been committed for 40 years to two things: destroying any possibility of a Palestinian state and destroying or decapitating the Iranian regime. And he is closer than ever to achieving those goals. We have to look at the guy and say he has come a long way and has been underestimated the whole way along by American presidents who he has manipulated masterfully over the decades, and by a lot of people in the media, by foreign policy experts. And it is an extremely forceful personality. And you're right, he doesn't care whether you like him or not. He really doesn't care about that. He's not. He was extremely unpopular in Israel, at least until this war started. His very shaky coalition was in danger of collapsing as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago over domestic political issues unrelated to this stuff. He's survived, criminal indictments, massive street protests that we've seen over the hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. I think 3 scandals involving extramarital affairs, which for a lot of, nobody cares about that these days anymore. And he's absolutely a survivor in all these contexts that would have defeated lesser politicians. He's a master manipulator, a master gaslighter, and a really skilled politician. All things that Donald Trump wishes he were.
And I think, obviously, like you said, Netanyahu has really gotten certain people that are much smarter than Trump on the ropes. He has manipulated Bill Clinton. He's manipulated Barack Obama. Unfortunately, I think it was easy to manipulate Joe Biden.
It was.
Donald Trump, however, that guy's a layup.
It's clear, among other things, that Donald Trump was very angry at Netanyahu after Biden won the election. Bibi was one of the first people to call Biden because he's a master manipulator. He was like, okay, this guy's going to be the president now. I got to start working. I got to work the ref, whoever the ref may be. But I don't think that fazed Netanyahu too much. Okay, we've got Biden for 4 years, and now Trump is back. I know how to, kiss his behind in a way that is going to seem flattering to him, but also get my desired results. Now, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows whether Trump was BSing when he said he wanted negotiations with the Iranians, and he knew that Netanyahu was going to attack Iran. All of these outcomes are are possible. It's possible that he knew. I think that he genuinely would prefer to be the deal maker. That's what he likes. And by some indications, the Iranians were pretty close to agreeing to virtually the same deal that they had made with Barack Obama 10 years ago that Trump threw away. And Netanyahu doesn't want that. And in every encounter with U.S. presidents over the last 40 years, he gets what he wants.
I want to be clear, this is speculation, not reporting of facts. But I think given the choices between Netanyahu and Trump are trying to like conspire to sell this war by like pretending to the Iranians that there was a deal and then bombing, or Netanyahu recognizes that Trump is stupid and weak and he can let him do his thing while he then just bombs Iran, and then he can call Trump up and, you know, say a lot of things that manipulate him, narcissist, into joining the war. I think I know which story is likelier. It is definitely the latter.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, you mentioned Bill Clinton earlier, the famous quote from Bill Clinton after the first time you met Netanyahu was, "Who's the effing superpower here?" And I think it's a legitimate question. I think that Netanyahu has figured out how to invert the supposed relationship between the U.S. and Israel, because ever since the days of Harry Truman and the establishment of the State of Israel, they are interlocked entities, and he knows how to exploit that in a way that no U.S. president can escape from so far.
Trump's weakness and the thing that makes him so scary is he believes whatever the last person he spoke to told him to believe. However, it is the thing that might save us, which is that there are these people in the MAGA coalition, many who are very powerful and have Trump's ear, like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, as you said earlier, who are very much against this war. And I cannot believe that we have to hope that Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon are going to save us. But I kind of think that's where we're at. And, you know, I know that Tucker Carlson hates me, so maybe he watches this show.
I think it's likely, honestly.
Yeah, I don't want to think about what he's wearing while he does that. But
Hey, Tucker, how's it going up in Maine, buddy?
Keep the door shut, Tucker. Anyway, if you're going to give Tucker some advice on how to get Trump off this very, very dangerous path towards war with Iran, what would you tell him?
Yeah, it's really a dark fate for people like you and me to be rooting for Tucker Carlson to be the influential person in the Trump White House. But I think there is a real chance of that. You know, the Bannon relationship at this point, I don't completely understand. I don't know whether Steve's in or out. But Tucker Carlson is somebody who seems to be able to get Trump's ear on a lot of occasions. And he's very articulate spokesman for a particular point of view, which is that the glorious future of, you know, the MAGA-fied America does not involve going to war in other countries, and particularly does not involve going to war on behalf of Israel. And I think that Tucker can probably talk about the calls that he gets, the sentiment that he reads from, you know, people who voted for Trump. And you and I have seen plenty of this on social media. It's hard to know the scale of it. But people who are like, I voted for Trump and I love everything about the guy, but I'm done if he does this. And I think it would be a really significant schism in MAGA world if there is actually U.S. military intervention in Iran, to say nothing of the disaster for the world that would be.
Yeah, this is where the narcissism matters again, because like I said in the monologue, this is how narcissists defeat themselves. They create these big grand schemes and then they fail and then they're humiliated. And invading Iran is basically that in a nutshell. It's oh, it's going to be this glorious victory, but actually it's going to be a resounding, well, not a defeat, but it's going to be a quagmire. These things are going to turn into quagmires and it's going to be humiliating. And the one thing that narcissists can do sometimes is sometimes recognize that that's coming for them and that they don't want to humiliate themselves that way, especially if somebody underscores for them that this is a humiliation that's in the cards. And so I really do hope somebody gets in Trump's ear and is like, you will be humiliated.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, We discussed earlier Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Ted Cruz, where he pointed out that Iran is a country of more than 90 million people. And yes, it is in a weakened condition militarily. Yes, there are the theocratic regime may be unpopular at home, but there's no better way to unify a country than for the United States to invade it.
How many people live in Iran, by the way? I don't know the population. At all? No, I don't know the population. You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple? How many people live in Iran? 92 million. Okay.
And a large, sophisticated country of 90 million people that, weakened as it is going to have a lot of people willing to fight American invaders. Yeah. It's potentially much worse than Iraq. It's potentially much worse than Vietnam. It is an unwinnable war if the United States really commits to it on that level. And it is a war that will change the Middle East for the worse decades to come. It might suit Netanyahu's aims because what he wants is for Israel to be the lone hegemonic power in the Middle East. He probably doesn't particularly care if the United States is humiliated.
No, he doesn't care at all.
And that's part of what people might need to explain to Donald Trump, is that he's getting played here by somebody who's pursuing his own goals.
So this is some heavy stuff.
I know, man. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. I asked you here to help explain this heavy stuff. But we do try to end on a light note to make people feel a little bit better at the end of their day. We call it mic drop. So on the theme of narcissism, Donald Trump, part of his appeal to people is the fantasy of being a narcissist, where you can just brag about anything regardless of how untrue it is. So I want to ask you, if you had no ability, if you had no inhibitions and could just brag like a narcissist about one thing, what would it be?
It's a kind of a trick question, right? Because you're asking me to reveal something where I do feel some pride and some anxiety or whatever. Like a lot of writers, I pride myself on the idea, like a lot of journalists, I pride myself on the idea that I can see patterns and things, that I can discern the underlying narrative that maybe other people are too dumb to perceive. I actually? But you're asking me for the arrogance part of this. And then, of course, reality comes along and delivers a lesson that maybe your perception of the underlying narrative wasn't quite as good as you thought it did. I kind of saw the first Trump election coming. I didn't really see the second one coming, and that kind of thing puts the humility in a lot of us.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought there was comedy value in this question, because it's and also helps illustrate normal people don't actually want to brag because it's embarrassing.
Usually not. So now it's your turn, I think.
Yeah.
You're not getting off easy.
So I'm really into weightlifting, and that's always that piece, because you can't brag about it. You can't just be at the bar talking to people about how much you press. That's obnoxious. It's gauche. You just kind of sit back and hope people notice that you're ripped, And when they don't, you're like, well, I guess I have to work harder. And it causes that spiral, but is also a reminder why we don't encourage people to talk about this stuff, because it can get in your head.
Having for brief periods been your housemate at political conventions and stuff like that, I've never observed the weightlifting, but I can testify to the early morning Amanda Marcotte workout, which is quite impressive and puts other people to shame. So you can take that for what it's worth.
Well, thank you. No, see, I'm blushing instead of gloating. So if you're worried that you're a narcissist, that's kind of the test. So, Andrew, I usually ask people to pimp their stuff at the end of the episode, but you work for us. So I just want you to tell the audience, what are you working on this weekend? What can they read from you next?
Well, I will point out that last weekend I did publish a commentary or an analytical piece about Bibi Netanyahu and how much he's winning, even though everybody hates him. And I imagine that there's going to be another column coming this week on the Iran-Israel situation. I haven't written it yet, so you can look for something probably publishing this coming Sunday morning on Salon, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you again, Andrew, for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys, for watching, but don't stop now. The encore section is next. It's where we have our song recommendation, because, what's the point of fighting for freedom if we're not going to have some fun? And please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. everyone, I'm coming to you from the Singing Fountain on East Passyunk. It is a little public space near my partner's record store, Latchkey. The Pride Festival is going on right now, and as you can see, I'm setting up, getting ready to DJ. Today's music recommendation, however, because the theme is narcissism of the episode, I thought I would recommend a song called I Love Myself by an Arizona band called Playboy Man Baby. You can't forget a name like that, Playboy Man Baby. I saw them play at Punk Rock Bowling in Las Vegas a couple years ago. They did not play the main festival, but they played one of the pool parties, and they just blew me and my friends away. They were so funny and so weird and so quirky. I wouldn't necessarily say they're punk rock. They're very much more like indie rock, with like maybe like a little bit of like a teensy bit of a post-punk flair. Their songs are very silly. Like they have a song called You Can Be a Fascist Too, which I think also is appropriate for this era. But I Love Myself is an ode to narcissism. And again, as is typical of their styles, very silly and satirical. They veer on almost being kind of a joke band, but yeah, check them out. Arizona's Playboy Man Baby, and happy Pride! If you want more Standing Room Only episodes, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Standing Room Only started as a newsletter, and it's free to read. Click the link to subscribe. I love tips. These political battles are playing out in our local communities, your family, your school, your neighborhood. If you have a story, go ahead and drop me a line, leave it in comments, and don't forget to subscribe.